It says we're live. So how about the big reveal? Because look at this, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
all four of us are back. It is the Audible live Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, and Dr. Jene Bramel on tonight's program. Gentlemen, a fine good evening to all of you. It's been a while. Look at Gene all clean shaven and such.
You haven't seen me since I've
Boyish
been shaven?
Gene.
It has been a long time.
It has been a minute, but let's get in tonight because we have football. Before we get to Dr. Jene Bramel Bloom, a game update for our viewing audience.
Little clunky start somewhat, but Deshaun Watson not exactly having an easy time of it finding open receivers without DeAndre Hopkins. Biggest story here, David Johnson. It's like 2019 never happened. It's like 2017 and 2018 never happened. He looks fantastic. He had a touchdown run and also looks excellent as a receiver out there. Will Fuller, sometimes seen on the sidelines. You know, we thought this was going to be a big Will Fuller game. Brandon Cooks actually ends up playing. But L'Jarius Sneed, the rookie playing for the Chiefs in place of Bashaud Breeland, who's suspended, they're thrown at him, and he's looking good. So Houston, Bill O'Brien with some of course, questionable game management decisions. That's just a hallmark of any Houston matchup. On the Kansas City side, Patrick Mahomes just getting warmed up, mainly throwing to Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce getting a touchdown, and Sammy Watkins.
Really trying for DeMarcus Robinson, though.
And really trying for DeMarcus Robinson, too.
2 end zone targets.
Right, and Tyreek Hill out there, barely heard from. Mecole Hardman not out there as often as DeMarcus Robinson, certainly not targeted as much. But Sammy Watkins, I think we can look back and say it was always absurd that the number 2 receiver, whatever he did last year or didn't do, was available in 11th, 12th round. But, I think there's more people tilting here about what's happening. Although Clyde Edwards-Helaire, no targets yet, looks fantastic as a runner. Darrell Williams playing much the same role as Charkandrick West. And before you get worried about that, again, it was Charkandrick West not doing much for fantasy and not keeping Kareem Hunt from doing much for fantasy in his rookie year. So don't worry too much there. But looks like Kansas City is cruising in the first game of the year.
Matt, what do you think of that Chiefs backfield before we jump to Dr. Gene and just Clyde Edwards-Helaire? This is a kind of a debut for a lot of NFL fans. Maybe didn't follow LSU quite closely enough.
Yeah, well, they're going to get a chance to see how Andy Reid decides to proceed with this because on third downs in the second and also in the 2-minute drill, they went with Darrell Williams to start off with. When they backed up inside the 20, they went with Darrell Williams. So they may be easing Clyde Edwards-Helaire in when it comes to that type of a role. We'll see if whether that's just for a half, whether it's for a game, or whether it's for a month or even longer. And the Kansas City Chiefs, they're opening holes. I mean, this looks like Devin Singletary all over again in terms of like the huge creases that Edwards-Helaire is getting right now in this game. But he's also making the most of them. You're seeing him do a nice job of being able to find the creases in terms of the jump cut ability, being able to show that short change of direction quickness, and do a really nice job of being able to, turn direct angles into indirect angles and to turn wraps into reaches and get downfield. And David Johnson, who was the number 6 running back after 7 weeks in 2019, they're doing a really nice job with gap plays. They're doing a really nice job with misdirection. They just need to keep going to that well. The misdirection's working out very well with this particular offense. And that's something that some of the things that the Ravens do, you can see that the Texans do a little bit of that as well. So both running backs are doing a pretty good job. If, it's kind of funny how Edwards-Helaire gets out through here and you see it again. It's just like somebody they just kind of like swatted at him, and there was nothing really there. So he's, the quickness is there and the line is just really just like rolling out the red carpet for him right now.
I love how Collinsworth is like, they're not taking deep shots. And then they took like 3 deep shots in a row. So some things never change, just like the great information that you get from Dr. Jene Bramel. Gene, I have a zillion questions to ask you, but if you were to guess, you would probably guess that my first question would be about Cortland Sutton, because it is a Broncos show, and this ties into my Jerry Jeudy hype train that I am the conductor on. That's fine. My grandpa Paul Gonzalez worked for Union Pacific for 20 plus years, so I'll get on that train with Jerry Jeudy, Call of Judy. We might be hearing it more on Monday night if Sutton can't go against the Titans. AC joint sprain, day to day. These are better terms to use for Cortland Sutton, but what do you think?
They are, but I think we need to be concerned about this. The Broncos would not have sent him for an MRI if they didn't see something on his exam visually that concerned them, or something on the x-ray that worried them that it was something more than just a low-grade situation. The AC joint injury is a fairly simple injury to diagnose on examination. Sometimes when the collarbone's up a little bit, you worry about more than one ligament and whether or not it's a higher grade injury. When you hear MRI, you think, well, could it be something inside the shoulder joints? Is there something more going on in there from, is this a Jalen Rieger situation? Is this a situation where there might have been a dislocation or something like that? Or are we talking about a Mike Williams situation? And we don't know what the grade is to this injury. Day-to-day sounds good. I think if there's some sort of situation tomorrow where he gets a little bit of limited practice in and they're able to manage the range of motion and swelling and pain well enough, then maybe there's a chance for him to go on Monday night. But I think I'd consider him questionable at best. He's going to have to be cleared for contact and prove that he can move that shoulder around well enough to catch the ball. There's a chance, don't rule anybody out one day after the injury, but enough happened today that you'd have to be concerned because of how much concern the Broncos showed today.
Gene, not practicing and playing, that's like week 14 stuff. And it's week 1, and Mike Evans, I don't think he's going to practice, and they're saying he might play. And to complicate things, this is a late start on Sunday afternoon. What says ye?
Yeah, the wide receiver situation is not going to be fun this weekend for sure. Mike Evans was telling people, at least according to Ian Rappaport, folks close to him, close to Evans, that he was planning on playing. And so you would have expected at that point that maybe they gave him a little bit of some practice reps off on Wednesday, put him on the field on Thursday in anticipation of him being able to go this weekend because he's proved that he could be an important part of the game plan. And they didn't practice today. Bruce Arians didn't seem too concerned about his players on Wednesday, but, the longer this goes into the end of the week, unless it really is truly a minor situation, and we see him back on the practice field on Friday, off the injury report, or lots of good comments, including a media appearance by Mike Evans tomorrow on Friday, then I think we have to be concerned that this is going to be a game time decision at best. And that puts us in the scenario of how many targets is he going to get? Is Tom Brady going to be able to trust him? There's so many other potential mouths to feed in the Tampa Bay offense. What can we expect from Mike Evans? So right now, I think you consider him questionable at best, and you hope for a really reassuring Friday situation.
Gene, it looks like David Montgomery practiced and spoke to the media, and they seem to think that he might actually play, and they're optimistic about that. Are you as optimistic that he'll play well?
Well, I think that's a tough question to answer. The full practice on Friday tells you that whatever he did on Wednesday, the individual drills, even though it was kind of described as a glorified stretching exercise, went well enough that they wanted to see how we looked in as close to a full practice situation. And this isn't, an hour and a half of contact padded practices necessarily anymore in the league, but this gives you a sense that they are testing him today to see how he responds through the end of the week. If he does anything in practice tomorrow, if it's a full practice, you may see him pretty close to a full workload. And they've got Tarek Cohen, they've got some other options there, so I don't know that we're going to see an 18 to 25 touch game necessarily from him. But every single report from Monday through Thursday now has been positive for him, where it seemed that everybody was surprised that he was practicing on Wednesday, and now the tone has completely changed where folks would be surprised if he wasn't an important part of the game plan. So he's clearly trending towards playing, but I think we'll use tomorrow's practice as a guide, and whatever we get from Adam Schefter and others through the weekend to help us to decide just how much Chicago is planning to use him.
He is Dr. Jene Bramel. We're spinning him around the National Football League, talking about injuries here on the Audible Live. And, Mike Williams, I guess people wouldn't be counting on him a whole lot in that run-heavy offense anyway. But do you think he's going to play or not?
I think this is kind of 2 weeks into where we may be with Cortland Sutton. We go through these AC sprain type injuries year after year after year with wide receivers, and we just don't know what the level of severity is, what the pain control may be, where the range of motion is. And Mike Williams, having not done much until a couple of limited practices, tells you that they want to keep him in condition. But until you go through a full practice or you hear that he's going to play, there's no indication that he's been cleared for contact, and there's no indication that the team is trusting him to play. So he is another player that we're going Friday, probably all the way up to game time on Sunday afternoon, to decide whether or not he's going to be able to go. Full practice and a reassuring note from Anthony Lynn would be great tomorrow. Don't expect to get it. I think he's going to be one of 4 or 5 players that we're dealing with a game time decision through the weekend.
Miles Sanders, Gene. Where this rubber meets the road is, do we play him or do we not play him?
Yeah, I mean, I think you play him, but Doug Peterson does not usually give you much specifics at all. It's day to day when he means week to week. It's week to week when he means multiple weeks. On Wednesday, he said, we're going to be careful with him. We may not have him on the field all the time. That is ludicrously specific from Doug Peterson, and there's no reason for him to say that. Generally, if he wanted to keep folks guessing, he'd say what he usually says is day to day, we'll see what happens. Adam Kaplan, who is as plugged in Philadelphia and knows what he's talking about injuries years and years and years and years, has said from the beginning this is a mild injury and he's not concerned about it. He's not speaking up as much other than to say he's limited in practice as expected. I just don't think you're going to get, again, if we're thinking about touches, I think you could probably expect him to see fewer series than you would before. If he feels great and things are going well and Boston Scott isn't productive or the Eagles are in a game script situation where Miles Sanders makes sense, they don't have a ton of stuff at wide receiver right now. It's probably going to be a tight end game to begin with. So you're thinking that Carson Wentz is going to use those players around him, and you don't necessarily need Miles Sanders in that situation. If they get a big lead, you're probably not going to see him much. He's another player that I wouldn't count on 20 touches. It's certainly within the realm of possibility, but he's probably in the realm of 10 to 15, and that could be enough for the Eagles for him to be effective. He's probably, that level of usage is going to put him in the run back 2 with upside range, I would think, in your tiers this week. Again, practice participation on Friday, like always, is going to be important. The fact that he's had back-to-back limited practices and really hasn't been limited in pads is a good situation. So maybe we'll hear a little bit more from the Eagles tomorrow to make us think that, he could hit that 20 to 25 touch range, but kind of feel like he's going to be more in the 12 to 18 scenario. And that's enough, I think, to play him, depending on, unless you guys are aware of, a huge number of other guys that you trust this week. I don't know that that's going to be the case.
Gene, thoughts on Kenny Galaday and his hamstring?
Yeah, I was hoping that this was just precautionary when you went through the injury report Wednesday, because we just very rarely get anything from the Lions anymore with Matt Patricia on board as far as the way injury situations are going to be. But since it's confirmed on Thursday to be something that occurred in practice on Wednesday and they didn't trust him to be back out on the field on Thursday, my sense is you're probably, like the other guys we've talked so far, this is going to be a limited Friday practice, a not much information out of Detroit, awaiting to see what Adam Schefter has to say about him overnight on Saturday to help make decisions. So I'm hopeful at this point, but I'm not in any way expecting him to be full go until we see something more reassuring at practice on Friday.
Well, I must say I hate two-part questions because they're awful. And now in the era of Zoom press conferences, everyone's trying to get in 2 questions because you don't know if it's going to come back to you and you can't talk over everybody at a press conference like you normally can. But Dr. Gene, 2-parter, but it's the same team. So I feel it's fair. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, because Deebo, we're like, okay, he's not going to play for a couple of weeks, and then it's like, I don't know, and then Brandon Ayuk, we're like, oh man, he might not play, and then it's like, no, he's kind of heading that way. How are fantasy GMs? How are we supposed to look at this 49ers wide receiver situation with Deebo and Brandon?
Yeah, I think with regard to Deebo, I think you are reassured that they didn't keep him on some sort of an active list, whether it was the PUP or move him to injured reserve as the season started. And hopefully that's not something that we see happen in week 2. He's not practicing. They're going to bring him along relatively slowly. Unfortunately, this is now looking more like a 12 to 14 week situation as it was hinted at initially, which makes you wonder what their level of concern is, or if they're just giving him every opportunity to recondition so that he doesn't have the soft tissue injuries. And, if you looked at the injury report this week, I meant to go back and add it up. I did not. I would be surprised if fewer than 70% of the players that were listed on the injury report had, it seemed like it was 7 out of 10 had a hamstring injury. That may be where the Niners are going with Ayuk. When he didn't practice on Wednesday, I figured, we were in the same spot with a lot of these other hamstring folks. But the tone of the comments from Kyle Shanahan and the folks around San Francisco, Grant Cohn in particular, this afternoon on Thursday, really felt like they would be surprised if he didn't play. So maybe knowing that they didn't have Samuel, knowing that there's been so many issues with that wide receiver group, knowing that Ayuk looked pretty good earlier in the preseason, they're taking their time with him, hoping that he responds well to what happened in Thursday's practice. Maybe he'll do a little bit more on Friday, but he is certainly trending towards playing where that didn't look to be the case earlier in the week.
Gene, Danielle Hunter has more than a tweak, a neck, and at least 3 weeks. And this one, before one of his teammates, I think it was Eric Kendrick, said, he's tough to replace. Everyone said, well, wait, because Mike Zimmer was certainly making it seem like he was going to be okay for the beginning of the season. Any more insight to this Titanic player on the defensive side?
No, and the Vikings really haven't released a lot of information about this. I haven't been as specific in looking into defensive injuries in the past couple of weeks, so I don't have a lot of details on Hunter. The fact that they put him on injured reserve is not as big a deal as it might be in other years because it's an unlimited situation and it's only a 3-week absence. Without a lot more information about the injury to know, just whenever you hear a neck situation like that, it makes you worried about whether or not there's a herniated disc situation. And with all the mispractice that he had this preseason, it's definitely something that could trend longer than 3 weeks. And if we get to that point and we're not hearing that he's likely to return to practice as we're going into week 3, then I think we really need to be concerned that this could be a longer term deal.
So what about Deandre Swift and his hip?
I wouldn't just say it's nice to know that it's his hip, but it is good because all we had heard that it was a leg injury. We weren't really sure what was what. He's been able to practice on a limited basis a couple of times this week. Seems like things are trending favorably for him. With Adrian Peterson on board, he probably wasn't going to have a major role in these first couple of weeks at this point. You hope that it's something relatively minor, a soft tissue situation, rather than something up in the joint that could recur through the season. But it's good to see him have back-to-back limited practices. I suppose there's a possibility that he's listed questionable and then is listed as inactive because they don't need him with those other two players, Peterson and Johnson, ready to go. But I think at best this weekend we're probably going to see 5 to 10 touches, and Swift is somebody that we're not likely to see really come into his own if he does this year until closer to the second half of the season.
Spinning you around the league with Dr. Jene Bramel, going over some injury situations, and from one rookie to another rookie, but this time Jalen Reagor. And kind of like I said with the Ayuk thing, it's like, oh, he's not going to play. Oh, well, he might. That's kind of the word for Reagor right now.
I think there's enough time for Reagor to have recovered. It is no fun to have your shoulder dislocated, but there's generally not a ton of damage that's there. There's some damage to the labrum, almost certainly, and some other issues going on there. But once the pain goes away and the shoulder joint seems stable on exam, then players can play in a harness. And as we saw, with other players through the offseason already, you're not really sure whether or not Tyrell Williams, chief among them, you're not really sure whether or not when you put him back on the field in a contact situation, whether or not the shoulder is going to hold up or not. So I think this is kind of a week-to-week, month-to-month deal for him, but the fact that the Eagles put him through a full practice today strongly suggests that they cleared him for contact and they're expecting him to be able to play. He's been able to stay in reasonably well condition, and he was a limited practice on Wednesday. I think this was the angle all along for Philadelphia, and they need him. So assuming there's nothing unusual in Friday's practice report, I think you can expect him to play. And then, he's going to be out there for as many snaps as he can handle. And then it becomes a week-to-week situation about whether or not he has any recurrence of those shoulder dislocations, and that would end his season. It's really hard to put a percentage chance that that's going to happen. It's definitely a higher risk now than it was a month and a half ago. But if they've cleared him for contact, he should be able to get out there and play. And then, we'll see how the rest of the season progresses.
We talked Galaday yet? I know you said wide receivers.
Yeah, we talked Galaday.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one very specific thing, though, about when it was said that they're going to be cautious with him. And maybe you can unpack this for me, Gene, because I don't understand how limiting him in practice on Thursday is warranted because it's not the same intensity as the game on Sunday when you're asking him to go full out. So is this something that you think is maybe a little bit disingenuous by Detroit, or are you taking it at face value?
No, I think the question is this a very mild situation where they didn't really want to stress him out 24 hours later? And there's nothing about the Lions offense that's new necessarily. They know what they have. Stafford knows what to do with Galaday on the field. It really isn't much different other than the running back situation. The passing situation is what it is. And they'll put him through the paces tomorrow, probably call him a game time decision and move on. Or he doesn't practice tomorrow. We know that it's a significant situation, and the clock was ticking as soon as he left the practice field on Wednesday, and it becomes very difficult for any sort of significant soft tissue injury to recover within 4 days to be able to do what they need to do on the field. So I don't think it's disingenuous. It could well be precautionary. Both of those things you could describe as precautionary, whether it means they're expecting him to play or not. Again, it being Detroit, good luck. Didn't really like the tone of what we were hearing from the beat writers because they made a point to say it was a new injury and that there's some concern there. I think every team in this situation is going to say it's precautionary. Again, I think this is going to be a limited, questionable game time decision. I think it would be awesome if we saw him back on the practice field on Friday and then speaking to the media and give us a good sense that that's what's going to happen. But I would not expect that at all.
So what about Amari Cooper and that hamstring? I mean, a lot of people seem to be down on him for all sorts of cockamamie reasons. Is this going to be one that's legit?
Not while I'm drinking, Matt.
I like the word cockamamie.
Well,
How
do you spell that?
Cockmamie, I think.
Sorry, Joe.
Spoken like a true magazine editor there.
Right,
sure.
there you go. Maybe the
I would
A's
put
in there
Cooper
too.
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I'd put Cooper on the long list of players where we had some concern. I listed him on Monday as folks to watch for, knowing that a large percentage of those folks were truly precautionary over the last couple of weeks of training camp. Back-to-back full practices. The Cowboys went through the motions of listing him on there, probably because he's still getting a little bit of treatment, but doesn't seem to be a huge concern. But we'll find out. I mean, the Cowboys have other options, so you could see a player like that playing, and if he is not at full strength and ability to separate, him running routes out there and being on the field for 40 plays doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get double-digit targets. So I haven't heard anything that has me concerned. The Cowboys have been pretty adamant all along that even though he wasn't practicing those last couple of weeks of the preseason, they weren't worried. Cooper has played through injury in the past, so I would expect him to get a pretty full workload. But one of the things I'm interested in seeing in these first couple of weeks is exactly how Dak Prescott sort of spreads the wealth to all of those weapons that he's got, from back to wide receiver to slot receiver to tight end.
It is the Audible Live here on Thursday night, and it's great having everybody here with us in this show. One more round for Dr. Gene. And Dr. Gene, I know you hate injury prone. I'm not going to talk about that. But what I will talk about is my second draft philosophy, which I'm sure you might have heard about, that I've been promoting. Like, this is like 2011. They're going to start playing and guys are going to get hurt. In 2011, it was a rash of Achilles injuries. We don't want to predict anything. We want everyone to stay healthy forever and ever and ever. But as we're seeing, even in these Cortland Sutton situations, I haven't even gotten to a game. I sound like Jim Mora. I just wanted to win a game, playoffs. Is that something that you could anticipate? Is that something where, people need to think about? And the reason why I say second draft is because you're going to draft. Everybody feels great about their team after a draft, but that waiver wire is going to basically supplement another draft because we might see a rash of injuries as guys actually start playing football. Is that something you get down with? Do you poo-poo the idea? What say you?
No, I wouldn't poo-poo anything at all. This year, there were 10 full-speed padded practices. That's it. Lots of these players, for any number of reasons, weren't participating in those. Now, they were going pretty close to full speed. Some of the videos that we saw of the individual drills in those conditioning practices leading up to that, they were going full speed. But the thing I always talk about with these guys is, when you're in a game situation and the adrenaline is going and everybody is going at absolute 100% speed, and there's all sorts of uncertain situations around your body in a collision sport, your body has to react in a totally different way than an individual drill that you've done at full speed over and over and over again for most of your career. 10 padded practices is great. And I think they needed that additional conditioning time, and it just is what it is during the pandemic time here. Everything is sped up. But yes, we are going to see a ton of compensation injuries and conditioning injuries, I think, more than usual. I shouldn't say a ton, but I'm reading in the chat room that David Johnson may already be dealing with something coming out of
leg
halftime.
Injury is
so,
what they say.
Trying to warm up coming out of halftime, the few padded practices, everything that goes along with that, I think we're probably going to see some issues in these first couple of weeks. Hopefully it's nothing significant. You mentioned Achilles, ACL injuries can sometimes be considered a reconditioning situation just because of all the stabilizing muscles from the quads to the hamstrings that help the knee stability as well. I'm hoping that we don't see too many multiple week season ending situations. But yeah, I think there's every reason to anticipate that we're going to be dealing with some soft tissue stuff. Again, just looking at that injury report, had they gone through a full preseason, we'd have seen hands and backs and shoulders and this and that. It was almost all hamstring, and especially at the wide receiver position. There's some at the running back as well, but we've got 32 teams going at it in the next 4 days. So I'm pretty sure on Monday there is going to be a long list of soft tissue things that we're going to have to be working through and watching carefully as we go to week 2 and 3.
Actually, Duke Johnson, by the way.
Duke,
Duke,
good.
Duke Johnson.
Well, not good, but for those that were concerned about David Johnson having such a great first half and then not being able to stay healthy, that's good.
Par for the course with Duke, anyway.
Yeah.
If you ask any Cleveland fan, they'll tell you they're glad he's gone because this is what happens. He doesn't show up on the injury report, but he never shows up for the second half or the third quarter or something like that. And this is why they wanted to get rid of him.
Yeah. Wish I would have known that when I took him in the 15th round. Yeah. Okay, Gene. Gene, here's the task, okay? A whole section of a stadium, and we're talking about the cutouts. And your job is to fill up. You have to come up with an idea to fill it up. The budget's no problem. Who do you want to have on these cutouts staring at the opposing team to intimidate them, or otherwise? What are you going to do with this opportunity?
I'd have every hard-hitting safety from the 80s and 90s there. Nice. That's what I'd have. Just the whole front row of Atwater and Easley and Fulcher and all of those guys. That's what I would have there.
I like it.
That was an easy answer for me. I'm wearing a Mahomes shirt tonight that Matt sent me, but if I had my way, it would be all 230-pound safeties wreaking havoc over the middle all the time. Back to my defensive roots.
Like it a lot. So, are we going to have any reason to excuse Tyrod Taylor for the play that he has with the calf? Or are there going to be no excuses at all?
No, that seems to be in the precautionary. It was a little bit surprising. We really hadn't heard that there were any quarterbacks other than Carson Wentz that were under any struggles at all. We heard a little bit about Ben Roethlisberger and his arm here or there, and Carson Wentz with whatever lower leg thing that he was dealing with. But those guys are not on the practice participation report. It was a little bit of a surprise to see Tyrod Taylor. At least I wasn't aware of him missing any practice time. So, again, the NFL is required to list players that are getting any treatment regardless of how much they practice, and that's probably all that it is, that he was getting a little bit of treatment in the training room for it. No concern with him this week, and hopefully it's not something that ends up being aggravated where we have to watch him over the longer term.
He is Dr. Jene Bramel, ladies and gentlemen. You follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel. And by the way, last Friday I walked into the Broncos stadium with Steve, and nicest guy ever, right? This is a smiling assassin. And so we're going through security. Everyone's masked up, and you have to go to this camera, and it's like, I see your mask, and then takes your temperature and all these sorts of things. And April was working security, and she's like, wait a second, I hear your voice. Are you Cecil Lammey? Oh my God, I'm like fangirling here. And I was like, this is Steve Atwater. He's a Hall of Famer. Don't worry about me. Steve is like the man. He is so humble, so kind. And
I tried hard not to fanboy out when you introduced him to us a couple of years ago down in
Senior
Mobile.
Bowl?
Yeah, I'm not like Waldman who wants to sack John Elway in the Starbucks line. I'm going to shake your hand and quietly move on.
Right. Or Waldman when he sees Ernest Biner. How about that? And I will say this, and from the bottom of my heart, because I don't know exactly how many of these I can make, but just being here with my guys, because you all are so very important to me. 2020 sucks for large reasons. But just to be here with all of us tonight together, it's very good for my soul and my heart. So thank you guys. Thank you, Dr. Gene. Hope to see you soon, buddy. Take care.
Absolutely. Everything back at you for sure. We were so excited. Well, I should have gotten in the chat room. I was listening live when you made the announcement that you were going to be back on Thursday. So I was cheering into the headset when I heard that live. So it was good to see you.
I'm sure he hit his easy chair like David Fulcher too.
Faux rock forever. See y'all.
Have a good one. There he is. We need a game update, Sigmund Bloom.
Yeah, game update is the Texans just look like it's a preseason game. Meanwhile, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is showing everybody what he can do, and just his short area quicks and his processor speed in real time, making tacklers look like fools on the way to the end zone. So, looking for him in the passing game, not so much happening. But otherwise, Phil Fuller's getting a few targets. The Texans, a real limp performance here. Kansas City, again, cruising and setting that pace, reminding the AFC that they're still the team to beat.
Matt, Jim in the chat room says, seeing the sausage being made by Waldman with that DirecTV remote.
Masterclass.
Really something. Explain to our viewers, they're multitasking here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a column every Monday called the Top 10 in Football Guys. So what I do is I show tape and explain why, the why behind what happened, and give you some possibilities in terms of what that means from a fantasy perspective. So I try and get as much tape as I possibly can, and I post it on Twitter, so it's just easy for me to pull off of Twitter and put onto to the Football Guys article that I put out. And so I'm just doing that right now as we go.
We'll follow Matt Waldman.
It's like Matt is going to be the first DJ of football. Like, I could imagine you on the wheels of steel, like queuing up plays and hitting people with plays that put them in the right mindset, and then they know, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
I'm sure I'll need your royal purple robe for that.
Exactly. You get the whole crowd going with, Bo Jackson running up the tunnel,
Yeah.
Bloom. Which Bo Jackson, Eric Stoner, or the real one?
All right, Matt. When we talk about the processor with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, before we jump into other news, I just want to know from your perspective, we often talk about footwork, right? Being able to create your own space, but it's stacking those moves. It's almost like a pass rusher. Running backs need to be able to do that just instinctively. Are you looking for that? Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, when he stands out to you at LSU, is it because that processor's tied so closely to those feet and he's just setting up moves before the defender's even made a move because he knows what he's going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with understanding the blocking scheme that you're going to be working with, and having the footwork patterns down in terms of understanding what to do in terms of the keys that you read, and also being able to adjust when there's some kind of off-script behavior, some penetration, being able to read the leverage of the line, that kind of thing. So all of that's very smooth. These are all very fundamental things that, to a degree, depending on how good you are, the level of refinement that you have to be able to really link your eyes and feet. It's like eyes feet coordination instead of eyes hand eye coordination, and he has that to a strong degree, where he's layered all that there. And he's a great fit in Kansas City because you spread the field out, in this situation, and you allow him to have multiple choices with fairly large creases. And so as a result of that, you have someone with his quickness in this situation, his pass receiving skills, who's certainly going to, we see what he's doing immediately right now. You obviously have a starter in this. What we're going to see probably down the line is whether or not there will be better teams in the Houston defense to be able to stop him, or to be able to stop the run game in ways where at least it's not like, you pick a hole, you get a hole, type of thing, that whole Oprah thing. I think that she'd be out there with that annoying trill, basically, yelling about every crease that he's getting. He's running through creases like a housewife at the Oprah set, who just got something under her chair.
Just got the car keys.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there we go. Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom, Cecil Lammey, and Bloom. I want to know how you approach week one. I talked about this last night on the local airwaves, but I'm fairly conservative in week one, almost like a playoff thing. Not quite the Marcy Rossman rule. And by the way, when I explained the Marcy Rossman rule to one Nick Ferguson, he was like, "Cecil, you are a bad person." And I'm like, "Yes, I know. At least I used to be." So it's a little bit more. I'm going with the solid guys. I'm going with the proven guys. I'm not taking a lot of chances in week one. What is your philosophy? Is we're all super excited that football's back?
Yeah, Cecil, we talked about it kind of when we did earlier today, What the Heck Flex, that you're basically starting. It's kind of like the Marcy Rossman rule. Like the first dance at least goes to Marcy. It's not dance on you. It's dance with who at least you rolled up to dance with. In these cases where there are some injuries, I think you're going to steer clear of injuries. matchups, I can't, you didn't draft Daniel Jones to start for you. I mean, there's some imposing matchups. Maybe there's someone you're trying to shoehorn into your lineup, like Will Fuller. You might have drafted Will Fuller as your number 4 receiver, but you wanted to get him in with Brandon Cooks potentially being limited, plus the nature of this matchup, even though Deshaun Watson just threw a pick. So, yeah, I don't know who we can get from your past to name Sproul after, Cecil, but I think that you dance with who at least you meant to dance with when you showed up at the prom.
Well, Jim says it's the opposite. He started Watkins for the glory,
yeah.
And it's lit. And being that I'm over 40, I can't really say it's lit. But Matt, I always love when 40-year-old guys like, that's so lit. It's fire, right?
Like the earring.
I'm like,
don't do
fire?
the earring.
What are you fire? You're 43, man. Come on, fire. Anyway, Matt, as I rant,
I'm 5 years from 4 o'clock Denny's. Okay, so whatever.
Are you more like Jim and you're like going to take those chances early, or are you more like me where it's like, I don't want to take any chances early?
Yeah, I actually take chances early with certain guys, especially where I feel like I like the matchup. A team like maybe say Laviska Shenault with the Jaguars, that'd be kind of fun. Just because he's probably going to start, he's going to see a lot of opportunities, and with the whole potential for garbage time. And as much as I love Larry Fitzgerald, the player, no, I'd rather just wait and see if I have to start Larry Fitzgerald. I don't mind taking a loss one time from that standpoint. And the way I look at it is like, I guess, you could go to the dance with Marcy Rossman, or you could go by yourself and scope out who you want to dance with. And and then if nobody's really there, then you could maybe give somebody else a call and see if, and show up and then, come and pick them up later. So there you go.
Let's see what you can do. It is the Audible Live. And Sigmund, are people barking up the wrong tree when it comes to the Jacksonville running back situation? Because James Robinson's all the talk. I'm not on Twitter that much because it's largely a cesspool. But, I notice people when they're, I'm getting James Robinson.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what are they getting? By the way, Dare Ogunbowale also added because Divine Zigbo is on injured reserve. But is this just one of those situations where you want to largely avoid, or is there something more here?
Well, you aren't going to get opportunity up to the tune of, say, 15 touches, 18 touches a game very often, right? We can all remember last year, how much was bid on Ty Johnson? How much was bid on Brian Hill? We were so thirsty for any running back with opportunity. And I'll frame it this way. I got a question because I haven't done a waiver wire column yet, not one with percentages. I did do just all the players you might want to pick up off of the waiver wire in preseason. And I said 25 to 50% for James Robinson. And what that stands for is you're not going to empty the wallet, okay? This isn't an idea where you have a talent and situation intersection that merits taking your one shot and just see what happens because of the Jacksonville situation as you lay out, Cease. But 25 to 50% still reflects that if James Robinson is even what Adrian Peterson was last year, then he's worth something because you're not just getting him for some segment of the season. You're getting him for the whole season, and we still don't know how chaotic this year is going to be. So, hey, somebody that is going to get 15 to 18 touches at running back might be more valuable than we think. So I still think there's something there. The team loves him, and Ogunbowale replacing Ozigbo is really, to me, a signal that James Robinson's kind of their feature back, and he can pass block, and he can play all 3 downs. So I think they're doing exactly what I anticipated in others, that they're in a rebuilding mode. So they know Leonard Fournette's not part of their future. They're moving on from him, and they're seeing what they have. And for now, that's James Robinson and, of course, Chris Thompson on pass downs. So there's enough there to be worth it, mainly because if there is something there, you're getting it the whole season. The longer you wait on the waiver wire, the less value you get in terms of ability to contribute to your team.
Windows, there's your drink, because you're getting a larger window, granted, if he plays the whole season. Matt, what are they getting with James Robinson?
You're getting a guy with a low center of gravity who fumbles the ball a lot, but hopefully he's cured that in camp. I mean, it's true.
Silent assassin.
Yeah. He has a low center of gravity. He's extremely quick. So what you're hoping here is that you're getting a guy who kind of is in that description of Clyde Edwards-Helaire in terms of, somebody who can, basically eliminate angles and be able to get into the open field. I think he's a lot quicker than fast. I think he's a better gap runner than he is a zone runner. So that fits kind of what the Jaguars used to be. We'll see what they do with under Gruden, if they're going to do a little more zone there. So it's just a matter of seeing how refined he can be. I thought he's an okay pass receiver. I thought his pass protection was so. We'll see whether or not that's something that, the people in camp, whether they're right about that, because the people in camp were like, pretty much aglow about what his play's been like. That could be true, or it could be like what we see sometimes when we see people covering the Senior Bowl. And when it comes to certain players,
look at Logan Thomas in these passes.
Yeah, or Nick
So
Vannett.
Oh yeah,
Nick Vannett's Rob Gronkowski. After 2 days,
Right.
So it's like we could see. It's just one of those situations where I think Bloom's giving you a good advice in terms of how you need to approach this. It's not lost value if you go after him, but yeah, I'm not exactly optimistic about him as a big time option. I wouldn't blow your whole wad for this.
Bloom, what are we doing with the Rams backfield? We didn't get to talk to Dr. Gene about Darrell Henderson, by the way, who's been he fully practiced today, right? Top of my head. So now it's 3 backs, and you've got McVay praising Kyle Shanahan for his RBBC.
Right.
So is that one of those barking up the wrong tree, largely avoid things like Jacksonville?
Possibly. It's interesting because some of these situations basically just boil down to what we want fantasy football to be about, right, guys? Like, evaluate players and stand behind your evaluations, because we can try to get structural advantages by anticipating what the coaches are going to do. But the thing is, whether it's Tampa Bay, whether it's the Rams, other situations, these coaches are basically telling us that how the players play is what's going to sort it out. And I think there is a take to say nobody's going to distinguish themselves, much like Tampa Bay last year, right? Nobody's going to distinguish themselves. So, but you're still basing that on the evaluation of the player and the evaluation of the situation with some idea of how the coaches will handle it. But, if you believe in Ronald Jones, then you should get Ronald Jones on your team, because I think that we know that he's going to get the first crack, and if he lives up to what their high hopes are for him, then he's going to leave Leonard Fournette and LaShawn McCoy on the bench. Likewise with the Rams, Cam Akers is going to get that chance. And Snead said something to the effect today, I think, like, they know they have Akers. They're pleased with where Akers is at, even though there wasn't an offseason. And they know they have Malcolm Brown, and Malcolm Brown can handle short yardage. Malcolm Brown can handle those situations. I believe it said something to the effect of running when the other team knows you're going to run 4-minute situations. And then Darrell Henderson when he's healthy. So you read into that Henderson maybe isn't ready to contribute. But obviously, if Henderson pops the way he did at Memphis, then he could have something to say about it. So I think the way you handle it is, if you have a strong positive feeling about any running back in these split backfields, then go ahead and put a chip on them and see what happens. But the idea that coaches, especially when the coaches are coming out and saying, because look, the Rams, McVay praised Kyle Shanahan, but he also added that you let the situation work itself out by how players earn playing time, right? Like, we're not saying run away from Raheem Mostert. Am I right, Matt Waldman?
We're saying he screwed up on Tevin Coleman. Mark McKinnon was a bust, and they got lucky on Raheem Mostert, and that McVay's in the same situation because he's used the same damn offensive scheme for the past year and a half until the Steelers. Somebody finally probably came up to him in the Steelers game and said, "Dude, you realize that there's been guys who've been fired 4 games earlier than this for being as stubborn as you've been."
So but even Kyle Shanahan, when he sees what Mostert can do, says, "No, not running back by committee. If we have a good running back, we play him."
Play one guy. Is that Cam Akers then, Matt?
It's probably at this point Malcolm Brown, because that's why they started him, is because he's the most competent guy to do everything that they need him to do. But I think that Cam Akers has the shot probably by midseason to be the guy. I mean, he's the most promising all-around player. He's the best athlete on that depth chart, and certainly Brown just gives them somebody who's not going to screw it up right now. And I think that that's what they're looking for, is someone who's going to get them the yards that they expect them to get, He can operate in the passing game. He can block for him. He's got some power to make up for whatever the creases that aren't there. When they aren't there, he can do something about it. But Akers is the most dynamic back and the best all-around guy. So, yeah, he's the guy you should be betting on.
I'm not saying I'm rooting for Bill O'Brien to get fired because that would be bad karma. And we don't want bad karma. And
he could wind up in Denver.
You could take over when Elway steps aside, right? So he can go be in ownership. All right, okay, Bloom. Give us that game update because it seems like the chat room has a certain direction for the Texans.
Yeah. See, you talked about the epic scale of Monday Night Football. We need Dandy Dawn singing right now. Turn out the lights. The party's over. All good things must come to an end. And maybe it is Bill O'Brien's coaching stint. I mean, maybe not after this week, but I mean, can't you see that Bill O'Brien can only take this team so far? You signed Deshaun Watson to the extension. That's who you're married to. That's whose franchise this is, not Bill O'Brien's franchise. Anyway, you get the touchdown to Tyreek Hill, go for it on 4th down and get a pass interference penalty. So, this is how we're looking at it. And it's just, I think that one of the things we're going to take out of this, hopefully the Colts don't stub their toe in Jacksonville this weekend, but just being just good enough, I think with this Colts team now entering the phase they're in, it's not enough. And with the Titans, who have fulfilled their blueprint, it's not enough. And I think even with 7 teams taking the playoffs, making the playoffs now, the Texans are a team that they've got to draw some energy from somewhere, not just from Deshaun Watson and J.J. Watt. And they just got totally outclassed. It's just week 1. You're not going to overreact to week 1. But every time you take the field, you say something about where your franchise is. And remember, as we talked about, Cease, the last time we saw the Texans, they jumped out to a lead on the Chiefs. And unlike other amazing comebacks, which we remember as a heroic story about the team that came back, we remember this one as a punchline on the Texans. And they came out facing the same team next game on the field, and they were a punchline. Again, guess who they get next week? Baltimore. Okay. 0-2 in the NFL is, 2 steps out on the plank. So I think that thinking Bill O'Brien being fired isn't necessarily the wrong thing, but maybe Texans fans won't be so lucky because I think that would probably make a lot of people happy.
Well, maybe we need to get Rivers McCown to ask Bill O'Brien if he eats at the Tilted Kilt or eats at Ruth Chris.
You're going to make Cecil.
As long as he doesn't eat at those 2 joints, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
We're fine. Everybody's fine. It's all fine. Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom, Cecil Lammey. And Matt, let's go over Washington football team's backfield because we have a healthy appreciation for Antonio Gibson. They've got J.D. McKissick listed as first on the depth chart. That's cute. And then Bryce Love is there as like oh my God. If Bryce Love is Bryce Love from a few years ago, that's something special. Alongside Gibson, who could be David Johnson minus the injuries from David Johnson, not Duke Johnson, but David Johnson. So what is the best approach here? Because there's exciting players. I remember after the draft talking about, I love Gibson. I hate that he went to Washington, but that's when they had Adrian Peterson and Darius Guice, in addition to all these other players, Peyton Barber, can't forget him. But now it's a clear path, but there's also Bryce Love, who's incredibly exciting. And J.D. McKissick, who's doing something, catching some passes.
Yeah, J.D. McKissick, is there a more puzzling thing that has happened that nobody's really talked about because it's so stunning that everybody can't believe it? Is that J.D. McKissick is the starter, the guy who got cut by the Atlanta Falcons and passed around by the Seattle Seahawks and, ends up here in Washington. He's a good scat back. That's basically, and a return specialist out of Central Arkansas, I believe that's where he was, or Arkansas State, I think it was, but I don't know what's going on with that. I can't even explain that one. That's kind of like seeing Bigfoot and being railing against Bigfoot for all these years. And then suddenly he walks by, hailing a cab, or talking to Gene. That's probably what it would be. But, Gene and his pet squirrel.
He's looking for squirrels.
Exactly. He and Gene are hunting squirrels together. But basically, you look at it. Sorry, I cracked myself up. Antonio.
That's a deep cut, by the way. If you've been watching this show for a while and you can identify the Dr. Gene Squirrel reference, you are a loyal listener.
I just got that mental image and it was too much, but Antonio Gibson's really the guy. Huh?
Oh boy. Let's see the page.
When it goes off the rails.
Okay, I think I can get
Second
back
hour
on that.
Audible in only 50 minutes.
Right. With 10
Right,
minutes
but
left.
seriously, Antonio Gibson is a guy that you should be looking at because he's someone that's going to work well in a gap style offense. You understand that they have a pretty good offensive line when this offensive line is healthy. And what he's been able to do in the receiving game, I know that he's not super experienced at Memphis, and you'll hear people say things like, well, he didn't beat out Darrell Henderson. Well, they don't play football like that. Like, that's not really, they use these guys, in multiple roles. They use Kenny Gainwell in multiple roles right now. They used Henderson and Tony Pollard in multiple roles like that. So you just have to look at really what the skills are. And Gibson has the full package in terms of, the physical skills and the ability to catch the ball. It's just a matter of where he can develop as a zone runner. And we're seeing, David Johnson in garbage time here do the lead sanitation engineer work. But when it comes to Bryce Love, he's a guy that scat back quickness, like what he can do in the receiving game. He's a tough player. I'm not completely sold on his decision making in terms of vision, even at the height of his career at Stanford. But at the very least, he can be a compelling option on third downs who might give you some, poor man's James White in DC.
Bloom, as we've been talking about these backfields, what I'm just gauging between all of us is kind of the, not necessarily threat level, but excitement level. Mm-hmm. So is there anyone that you think the fantasy community is too excited about? Or is there anyone that you think the fantasy community is not excited about enough in, entering this season? Again, we're all super happy that football's back and all that kind of stuff, but it seems like there's some backfields that are just kind of, I'd rather stay away from. And then there's backfields where I will put a chip down on Antonio Gibson, who I did in Fessel OG, and I'm glad to do it now because we drafted before Adrian Peterson was dumped. So is there something that sticks out to you that you could see corrected through this play in week one?
Yeah, maybe not in week one. And I'll say this. I do think that the excitement level on Antonio Gibson is about right, or could be higher, should be higher. And it's another one that falls into the Tampa Rams situation where Gibson's going to get a chance to play. I mean, whether it's 7 touches or 12 touches and 5 receptions and 5 carries or whatever he gets, if he pops on those touches, he's going to get more. Opportunity will beget production, will beget opportunity, will beget production, and so on. And Antonio Gibson, when you have none other than Adrian Peterson himself saying he's a hell of a talent and saying, hey, I guess they think that they want one guy and he can be that one guy, I'm going to take that at face value. My guy has been Nyheim Hines. And I just think that Nyheim Hines has always been one of the most explosive players on the field for the Colts. He's a former slot receiver. We saw what Phillip Rivers did with Austin Eckler, even out of training camp. And I've said this on the show a week or two ago. I can't remember which beat writer it was, maybe Zach Kiefer, who said that, framed it or in some form of maybe the talk of Hines getting 75 catches isn't crazy. In other words, this is someone who was a skeptic, hearing probably people like myself saying, oh, Nyheim Hines is going to, he had 63 catches as a rookie. He might surpass that this year because he's with Phillip Rivers, who's highly efficient and loves to throw to the running back. And somebody who didn't believe that coming into camp, watching camp for 2 weeks, saying, oh, he can do that. Maybe that's not crazy. I'm going to pay attention. The game against the Jags will probably be over by mid-second quarter, so this might not be the best game to evaluate that.
Right.
But when they have to play teams where they're going to have to open up the offense a little bit, I'm looking forward to seeing Hines.
Bloom, does that mean you adjust Marlon Mack or Jonathan Taylor expectations?
No, because this is a winning team. Taylor can be Derrick Henry by the end of the year. And Mack can certainly be good enough to be an every week play if he's getting the 15 carries and then it's Taylor getting to close games out. So I just think that Marlon Mack is probably a value at the first part of the season, but the reason you were taking Jonathan Taylor in the 3rd round and the 4th round is because of how he can close out the season for you, how he can be in the December games that same time of the year that Derrick Henry was doing his thing.
Matt, breathe. Breathe.
Andy Reid looks like me at Kroger with that mask on.
Yeah, right.
Except he forgot that you could use toothpaste to get off all that fog, or shaving cream, actually.
Shouldn't someone tell him that? Be like, it's okay, Andy. You can
like get a little edge gel, put it on there. You should be good to go.
And then it doesn't fog up, right?
That's right. But no, he's stuck in the soup aisle, I think, right now.
Ketchup, catsup.
Super quick, Matt, as we tie a big red bow on this show. Just for me personally, I want to know what you think about this Lynn Bowden move to Miami. Raiders obviously used to think highly of him, and then he's not a running back. Okay, Miami picks him up. I think they declared him as a receiver, if memory serves, for Miami. Is that right, Matt? But just from a dynasty perspective,
I didn't get that he was a third-round pick.
I didn't think he should be drafted there, but I didn't think a team would give up on him in August.
Yeah, certainly Victor made a whole thing about that. It was probably heard from somebody within the organization that said that he didn't learn the playbook well, that he was maybe a little too excited about the money that he got. And then Mike Mayock defended him and basically said, look at what this kid was at Kentucky. We had no problems with him, and we didn't think Las Vegas was going to be an issue for him. It's just that he had trouble, it was strictly on the field, and he had trouble in practice picking up blitzes. He had trouble blocking. He was someone who was slow with the playbook. And, from what you watch, I think it's understandable from that standpoint, because when you watch him at Kentucky, he was a budding receiver. He wasn't Randall Cobb, like a good receiver who had to play quarterback, or Hines Ward. He was a guy that was just learning to become a receiver that they put at quarterback, who was smart enough. And they said, even the commentators were talking about how this kid came from a really rough background and really made something of himself and is really mature. So I don't necessarily believe the reports about him. I think it was just that the Raiders made a mistake. They drafted him too high, and they felt like that maybe they could get something dynamic out of him. And as a result, they saw that, that's just, in addition to that, he was raw in just about every area, that he didn't get a lot of, really quality practice time in this COVID environment to work on the things they needed to. And they just decided to cut their losses as soon as possible, which I thought was smart, because he's got really nice balance. But for a young quarterback, for a quarterback, that's nice running keepers. But asking him to actually be it's like Jerick McKinnon. You look at Jerick McKinnon, it's a very similar thing, but McKinnon was even more dynamic as a player.
Right. Sigmund Bloom, final thoughts as we tie a bow on week one, real football.
Yeah, Watson to Akins in garbage time, by the way. Will Fuller getting some catches. Kenny Stills getting some drops. This is something I know I brought up on the show 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 times in the offseason. What is Deshaun Watson going to look like without DeAndre Hopkins? Early returns, not good.
Good thing you got that money.
Not good. And this isn't an imposing defense. L'Jarius Sneed. Why did the Texans lose tonight? Because they couldn't find a way to complete a pass on shutdown corner L'Jarius Sneed. No, this is not a success story. So, again, Baltimore next week. And I think absolutely, if they're for those markets where they have odds on the first coach to get fired. By the way, week 3, Pittsburgh. Now you're looking at 0-3. Okay. Bill O'Brien, wake-up call time.
It is wake-up call time. That is for sure. Wake-up call time comes early tomorrow morning, where I will be at the Broncos practice. So, gotta go. See you when I see you, and appreciate everyone out there. Do all the YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe, help us grow this YouTube channel. You certainly have helped us. Our podcast numbers are astronomical. Our downloads are great and fantastic. So wherever you download your podcast, iTunes, Spotify, it's truly humbling how many people listen to the Audible. So thank you. And thank you guys for watching. Thanks for liking this video. Again, all those YouTube things. And it is so great to be back with my brothers. So for the great Dr. Jene Bramel, the fantastic Matt Waldman, and the amazing Sigmund Bloom, I'm Cecil Lammey, sensational Cecil Lammey, saying thanks for watching. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.
Hey, Cecil, did Bill O'Brien